Proverbs 31, and we're in the second half of the book of Proverbs as we continue our book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse study through the Old Testament. This evening, we'll complete the book of Proverbs. It's been a long time coming, but I like this book so much, I would be tempted to start over and let's do it all again. It's been a while, but I'm going to keep on moving. We're going to hit Ecclesiastes next week, and that should be fun too. But we're in the middle of chapter 31. We're at verse 17. We started out in chapter 31 with King Lemuel, whose name means belongs to God, reminiscing about things that his mother had taught him. And he remembers the first part of that chapter. He remembers that his mother taught him or warned him about the danger of sexual immorality. That was verse 2 and 3. Then she warned him about the dangers of alcohol, verses 4 through 7. And then she encourages him to defend the defenseless in verses 8 and 9. These were things that he needed to know as a leader. He's a king. And if you're going to lead your people, you don't want to be immoral. You don't want to be inebriated when you're making decisions. And you want to be able to reach out and encourage your people so that you would have strong people and you would be a strong king. So now in verse 10, we started a brand new section. It's the second section of chapter 31. Verse 10 through 31 are an acrostic alphabetical poem. That means each verse starts with a consecutive letter of the Hebrew alphabet. There's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. So verse 10 starts with Aleph. Verse 11 starts with Bet. Verse 13 or 12 starts with Gimel. I would have had it wrong, wouldn't I? But each verse begins with this. And this is the section that's known as the virtuous woman or the wise woman. Now, remember, this is marriage guidance from a mother to a son. A lot of people use this list for different reasons, and I don't know that those reasons are unreasonable, but specifically, it's a mother trying to guide her son about the type of woman that would make a great wife. So the virtuous woman can be single or married, but each in their own particular ways will express the virtue in singleness or in family. So it doesn't separate it out. Some people say the virtuous wife, this is only for married women. No, it's not. It's for single women too. And I think I expressed to you last week, but I'm going to reiterate it again. The word for virtuous there in the Hebrew is the same expression that's translated mighty man of valor in the book of Judges. So though a mother is speaking to her son, there are elements in here that pertain to men. We want to be men of valor, so to speak, virtuous men too. So we're not only looking at the virtuous woman, but at the valiant men. Who would be worthy of a woman like this? I know a lot of guys look at the list and go, does she match? Does she fit? And they don't take time to go, do I fit? Am I worthy of someone like this? Would I be good enough to take care of her? Most guys I know probably not, but it's what we're going for. It's what we're looking for. It's what we want to be. So I want you to remember something very important. This woman never existed, okay? This is a mother's list that's idealistic. Here's the ideal. Here's what would be perfect. Here's what you'd really like to have. Nobody's going to match the list. I told you last week I met a lady who was close. She was 63 or 64. So in time, as we grow in the Lord, and there's valiant men that it takes that long to get to that point too. She never existed. This was given to Solomon, we believe, by his mother. So I say that because I don't want women to be condemned. Because when you read through this list, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't even come close. I know in my mind, I told you before, I started reading it as the bride of Christ, and I do not come close. I fall very short, but I'm so thankful for the blood of Jesus Christ that covers me, and the Lord looks at me and you as perfect. That blows my mind because I know I'm not. And the enemy's always there to remind me that I'm not, and I'm sure he does the same thing to you. You may not feel you can live up to this woman, and I don't believe that the Holy Spirit put this in here to condemn you. That's not the Lord. There is now therefore no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. When you feel condemned, where is condemnation coming from? The enemy. The Holy Spirit convicts. The enemy goes, you're horrible, you're rotten, you're bad, you've done evil things. And I have to say, yes, Lord, please forgive me. And he goes, what? I've forgiven you already. I moved it far away, as far as the east is from the west. I've tossed it in the deepest sea. Now I will convict you. You can do better. I'll help you. I'll encourage you. I'll give you the strength of my Holy Spirit to do these things. But I don't want to condemn you. That's not what this is about. We that are men in the room have a role model in Jesus. Now, I also know that, and so do all you guys too, if you're honest, you're never going to live up to that expectation in this life. I'm never going to be like Jesus. One of the fun things in premarital counseling, we always read Ephesians 5, and it says, wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto the Lord. And I always explain that you're going to do this like you would do it for Jesus, because he's never going to be Jesus. He's never going to be completely there. He's never going to be perfect. So the things you do for the Lord. Okay? It'll minister to your husband. It can bless your husband, but you're doing it because it's for the Lord. I always try to imagine this scenario where it's, Redlands, 110 degrees during the summer, and the guy's out mowing the lawn or something, and he comes in and he goes, I'm thirsty. And she goes, there's a refrigerator, get yourself something. My question is, if Jesus came in from outside and goes, I'm thirsty, what would you say? You will like water? I've got soda. You want me to make some lemonade? Iced tea? Whatever you'd like, Lord. Please make yourself comfortable. So this is just for women to men. It's men to women too. How do we treat each other in the Lord? How do we minister to one another? If I want to know anything about how to behave or how to act as a man, I look to Jesus. I can see there how I fall short, and it gets me to my knees. But where is the role model for women in the practical day-to-day routine? Right here. It's what we're reading right here. There is no woman who was called the virtuous woman in history. There she is. She lived during 512 to 528. Nobody liked that. Nobody liked that. So even as I want to become more like Jesus in practical matters, here's practical matters that's a model for women to shoot for, not to shoot at. This is horrible. Who put this in here? We can't do this. It's to shoot for, okay? It's something the Lord can help us with. So here are goals for me. Here's help for me. Here's a model. Pray and ask the Lord to help you live up to the ideal. And just as men fail to live up to the model Jesus has given us, expect that you're going to fail. You'll fall short. It's okay. The Lord knew that. But there's provision, again, through the blood of Jesus Christ that cleanses us. If you have no role models, if you have no goals, you're not going to get very far. We all look to someone who can inspire us, and I don't think there's better inspiration than Jesus Christ. Again, ideal situation. Solomon's mom, being a good Jewish mother, says, here's the ideal, here's the best. So, verse 10 started out with, we started the search for the virtuous woman, and he said, who can find a virtuous woman? And we talked about how difficult that really is, and her price is far above rubies. And we discussed the fact that rubies, for the majority part of the world, are worth more than diamonds. In different translations, there's several different precious gemstones that they use to express the value of this woman. She's priceless, literally. And if you think about it, she's a daughter of the Lord. How do you want to treat the Lord's daughter? And I hope that all men would think of women like that, not just another woman, but she's a daughter of the Lord, a daughter of the King. And how should we treat this princess? But she's greater value than diamonds. Then verse 11 and 12, we looked at her relationship with her husband. He can trust her. He has confidence in her. She does him good and not evil. She's consistent. And then verses 13 through 16, we looked at her work ethic and her ingenuity. It says she works willingly with her hands. she doesn't think that physical labor is beneath her. You remember Sarah and Rebecca and Rachel showed that women of high rank in society and wealth are not above manual or even sometimes menial labor. She brings her food from afar. She's out shopping for the best deals. Merchant ships, who knows how far it's got to come. She rises while it's yet night. She stays up late, makes sure that everything in her household is in order. She provides food for her household. She makes sure everyone is fed. And then she goes out and buys a field and plants a vineyard. She's very forward thinking. She works in simple and practical ways for her family and home. Now we continue tonight, and we're going to start with verses 17 through 20, and we're going to look at her strength and her compassion. Verse 17 says, she girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. Kind of sounds like she works out. Takes care of herself. Yeah, over there. There you go. You got it. She's a hard worker. I know some women that don't have to go to the gym because they work so hard during the day, especially if you have multitudes of children and you're chasing them all day. You run more miles than you might at the gym. And if you're lifting all these little kids, it might be more than the weight you'd lift during a regular workout. But she's a hard worker. She's strong. She's industrious. She works vigorously. And she has a legitimate sense of self-respect because she works so hard. And the result is that she's prospering. By the way, prospering in the Old Testament generally meant money, but it doesn't always mean money. There's a lot more about prospering in the spirit and laying up treasures in heaven than what you've got on the earth. But she uses her strength for productive purposes. We read that she girds herself with strength. The girding up, you remember in the New Testament we're told about girding up your loins for battle. It's preparing, it's removing obstacles. If men were wearing a long robe or something like that, there's a way to tie it up so it's out of your way when you get into a fight. And what this is really is like a strengthening belt or a workout belt. You've seen people put on a workout belt that keeps their back in place and that kind of thing. But she's girding herself up. She's got a belt around the midsection. It means getting ready for some kind of difficult action or physical labor. So this pictures her getting ready for her task with passion. I'm not just going to go do it. I'm going to be ready to go do it. I'm prepared to go do it. And I'm going to love doing this because I care about my family and about my home. Where does our strength really come from? We know it comes from the Lord, from the word of the Lord. And I believe this woman is into the word also. We're going to see that more clearly in just a moment. But verse 18, she perceives that her merchandise is good, and her lamp does not go out by night. Her merchandise, stuff she's manufacturing or making or providing, maybe for extra income or maybe just things for her family, the clothes she makes for her family, the meals she makes for her family. It's good stuff. And she takes care to manufacture the best articles. Her goods are held in high reputation. And she finds that while she pleases her customers, including her kids, she increases her own profits and reputation. It goes on in that verse and says her lamp, literally in the Hebrew, it gives us the idea of the lamp of testimony. That light doesn't go out. She's a shining light. We're commanded again in the New Testament. The book of Matthew tells us we're to be the light of the world. And this is saying that even in the blackest, darkest night, she still shines. She still shows up. And it reminds me of the old adage that a man's work is from sun to sun, but a woman's work is never done. She's up before the light. Her candle doesn't go out at night. Verse 19, she stretches out her hand to the distaff, and her hand holds the spindle. In other words, she's spinning her own thread. She's making cloth. She weaves her own cloth. And so the virtuous wife knows how to use the tools of technology available to her to manage her home well. She's not an excuse maker. Again, this shows her diligence and economy. She extends her hand to the poor. Yes, she reaches out her hands to the needy. So she's more than just a skillful manager or homemaker. She's also a woman of great compassion. And this compassion leads her to be generous rather than selfish. I'm going to keep all the extra stuff for my family. No, you know what? We've got enough, and I've got some extra here, and I've provided for my family, and I'm going to take the extra, and I'm going to provide for other people in need. She's able to minister to the poor. She's not only able, we see that she does minister to the poor. She cares for and helps the poor and needy. Like the Lord, what a beautiful picture of the Lord. He is always for the poor and the needy. We've seen several times throughout Proverbs how the Lord has cared for the poor. And she's an example of that Christ-like attitude, being generous to the poor and giving and helpful. It's something that you do, not just think about or talk about. She's actually doing it. And it doesn't indicate that she's going around talking about it. Say, by the way, did you know what I did this week? I fed a bunch of homeless people. You know, stars in heaven. She just does it. It's a part of her nature. It's a part of her character. It's what she does. And I like that. It's not just the feelings of emotion. Oh, that poor person. Somebody takes care of them. She actually does something about it. And I know that can be a difficult situation a lot of times. What can I do? How can I help? And I know there's parameters on that. I've told you before, it's really, really rare if I would give cash to somebody. I don't trust them. I've seen too much of it go for drugs and alcohol and other crazy things. But if they're hungry, maybe I can buy them a meal. If they need clothes, maybe I can get them a jacket. If they need shoes, maybe I can buy them a pair of shoes or boots or whatever they need to get their life on track. But she's doing something about it. She actually draws near to the poor and extends her hand and reaches out to those in need. Now in verses 21 through 23, we see God's blessing on this woman. She's not afraid of the snow for her household. Well, I thought about that this weekend. It's snowing everywhere. Were you afraid to let anybody go outside? You don't have a jacket. It's cold out there. You know, she's not afraid of that. All her household is clothed with scarlet. She doesn't worry about winter. She's ready when it comes. Her family has warm clothes, and she has the wisdom and diligence to prepare her household. And this just isn't about clothing. It's about all kinds of challenges and adversity. She's preparing them for things to come. She knows that there's stuff that happens. She's ready for it. Now the clothing is both warm and attractive. That word scarlet there, sometimes translated luxurious clothing. Sometimes scarlet or crimson is symbolic of royal clothing. And it implies, though, in the Hebrew that it's been double dyed or it's double thick clothing. She's going to make this really sturdy, really strong, really warm, and really good looking. So the spiritual example of this is she doesn't have to worry about hard times that are coming onto earth because she knows her family's covered with the blood, the crimson of Jesus Christ. She knows they're protected and cared for. She makes tapestry for herself. I'm not just taking care of my kids. I'm going to wear nice clothes too. It's back to the working out thing. I'm going to look good. I don't want to look like a pauper. I want to do the best I can to show that God's hand is upon me. It doesn't mean she needs to go overboard and carry the labels around. I had a commentary one time that, well, I still have it. It was really neat. The commentary is called "God Never Promised You a Hot Tub." Okay? And the whole idea is that we look for and expect things sometimes that aren't necessarily a need, but a want. And part of the commentary was a little made-up story about people out in our solar system who came from the Earth hundreds of years ago, who came back to Earth to do archaeological exploration. And they went to the village of New York City. Compared to the cities at that time, New York was just this little village. And they discovered some strange things there. They discovered what they believed were people putting the names of their gods on their clothing. You know, there was an alligator, maybe an alligator god or something like that. There's the horse thing, that all kinds of names, people's names, you know, Vuitton or, you know, I don't know. They kind of wondered if perhaps Levi's was tied to the tribe of Levi, you know. And the thing they couldn't figure out was high heels. Were these actually fighting instruments that you could spike people with? Certainly no one would want to walk around in these things. Interesting discoveries. But, sorry, little rabbit trail there. I just think it's funny. But she makes herself coverings. And her clothing is fine linen and purple. She dresses in quality garments, like the tabernacle hangings, practical righteousness and royal glory. And with God's blessing on her wisdom and diligence, this virtuous woman makes good things for herself and enjoys the personal mark of God's blessing on her family. Clothing is fine linen and purple. First Peter expands on this, where he ministers to women and says, don't let your adornment be merely outward. He's not saying don't have any outward adornment. He's saying don't just look for that only. Don't make it merely outward, the arranging of hair, wearing of gold, putting on fine apparel. Rather, let it be the hidden person of the heart. And that really sounds like who this woman is. With the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of the Lord. For in this manner, in former times, the holy women who trusted God adorned themselves, being submissive to their own husbands. Again, that sounds like he's referring maybe back to this woman. I'm sure he knew there were Proverbs of Solomon. I'm sure he'd read the Proverbs of Solomon. And this again is the virtuous woman. And we read about the clothing she sells and the clothing she has. Verse 23, her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. You remember we've mentioned several times that the gates is where you would go to court. If you had something that needed to be decided, the elders would be sitting in the gates. If it had to do with the city or commerce or my neighbor's parking on my lawn or something like that, you could go to the elders at the gate for a decision. It was always public. There were no closed court sessions. Everybody could be a part. Everybody could hear the decision. Everybody could know what was going on. And this woman has a husband who's sitting in the gates. He's one of the leaders of the city. And the implication here, verse 23, is that she has helped her husband advance. She's a credit to him. He's honored and esteemed and among the elders of the land, one that oversees the city, because her thrift and judgment reflect as a credit on him. Verse 24, she makes linen garments and she sells them, and as she supplies sashes for the merchants. Again, the wisdom and diligence of this virtuous woman leads her to not only provide the necessities of her family, but she makes enough and of such quality that she sells those necessities to the merchants. Again, the idea is as many as you can make, we'll take. It's that good. She cares for her family, but in a sense here, her mind, her vision go beyond to the outside world, where she does good for herself and her family. She has good works. She is faithful in ministering at home, clothes herself with goodness and righteousness, yet she has enough to spare to be a blessing to others, to give out to more than herself. Verse 25, strength and honor are her clothing. So when it comes to character, she's one of the best dressed, clothed with strength and honor. That, again, doesn't mean designer clothes or the newest clothes or the most expensive clothes. She's an honorable woman, and she shows that strength that she has in the Lord. She has a strong financial position and dignity that comes from that. She has strength of character and honor from her family, and friends will cover her, and she will rejoice in time to come. Some of this is almost repetitious, you know. We know about her clothes. We know that she's receiving honor, and it repeats it again. She's going to rejoice in times to come. What about the times to come? Well, today is okay, but who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? I love that old saying, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. That gives me the hope for this life. But she's going to rejoice not only in the present day, but she can rejoice in time to come. She's optimistic about the future. You know, the majority of people I talk to, especially in the world today, are not optimistic about the future at all. And even a lot of Christians, what's going to happen? I mean, Russia and China are getting together, and India and Venezuela and Cuba, and who knows, they're all going to attack us. North Korea, that's what I was thinking of. They're all going to come against us. They're going to do horrible things. You know what? I'm trusting the Lord. I'm optimistic about the future. I know the Lord is coming back. I know He loves us. I know He's going to take care of us. So she's optimistic about the future because she has prepared for it. It doesn't mean that she's stored up, you know, AR-15s or anything like that. But she knows that she's going to be taken care of in the future. And by the way, joyfulness and godliness always come together. Scripture tells us in Nehemiah, the joy of the Lord is our strength. Then in verses 26 and 27, we go to her inner life. We're getting a glimpse of her heart, the inside. She opens her mouth with wisdom. You know, when you don't know somebody very well and they open their mouth, you never know what's going to come out. Sometimes it's pleasing, sometimes it's disturbing. Sometimes I don't want to hear it. Unfortunately, I'm old enough to be able to say when I grew up, women didn't use foul language. At least it was the general principle. You didn't do it in public and you didn't do it around children. And I know sometimes men did, and somebody would always say, there's women and children here, knock it off. These days, boy, some of the women are worse than the men. It's like, not only do we want equality, we're going to surpass you. Wow. Her speech is distinguished by good sense and discretion. She speaks wisely because she has learned wisdom. I wish there were more men and women that would do this, that they would engage their brain before putting the mouth in gear. On her tongue is the law of kindness. Law of kindness on her tongue. She pours out grace. She's not only wise, she's kind. She speaks with gentle wisdom, not a domineering tone of voice. She's a woman of a meek and quiet spirit. That doesn't mean weak. Jesus was meek, but he wasn't weak. A woman of a meek and quiet spirit. And then in verse 27, she watches over the ways of her household. We've seen that a number of times. And she does not eat the bread of idleness. In other words, she manages her home well. She stays busy. She gives her household high priority. And the virtuous wife is observant of her family and ways. I think of some mothers that I know that are like always watching their kids and know what's going on and know where they are and know what's happening in school. I read a book once about relationships, and it talked about the difference between moms and dads. It says the mothers know everything about their children, their hopes, their dreams, their sorrows and hurts, their joys, what makes them happy. Dads are aware of some little people running around the house, but mom knows all about it. And that reminds me of this lady. She knows all about. She watches over the ways of her household, observant of her family, always busy looking after her family's needs, as well as giving direction to anyone else who may enter that circle of the household or the family. She makes sure those things are carried out. And by endeavor and precept, she guides her offspring. Question again for me that is very pronounced here is, do we look out for our family? And when I say our family, I'm speaking of more than my children or grandchildren. I'm speaking of our family in the Lord. Do we look out for our family? Are we watching out for each other? Are we caring for each other? Are we comforting each other, directing each other? The text says explicitly that she avoids laziness. Eating the bread of idleness is grammatical for indulging in laziness. And then verses 28 and 29, we see her family's public praise. Why does her family praise her publicly? Because she's a virtuous woman and she's doing all the things she should do. All too often, I hear wives and husbands murmuring about their spouse. You know, so he's like, And I warn them, don't do that, because just like this woman was a credit to her husband sitting in the gates, people will remember what you say about your spouse. Okay? So the guy's had a fight with his wife. He goes to the office and they go, what's wrong with you? You look pretty beat up today. My wife, you wouldn't believe her. Well, you know, the next couple of days they make up. A few months later at the office party, when he brings her, everybody in the office goes, oh, there's that crazy woman he's married. All they knew was what he told them, right? And the same thing goes the other way. So be careful what you say. It reflects back on you. If she's that bad, why did you marry her? If he's such a jerk, how did you get hooked up with him? Think about it. But her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Her husband and children, those people that know her the best, that would know the areas that are short, that would know the shortcomings or fallings, they praise her for her many excellent qualities. And a woman with such a character and wisdom rightfully deserves the blessings and praise of her family. Both her children and her husband not only see what she does, but they speak to others about it. My mom does this. My wife did that for me. And they speak of the blessedness of the woman who brings blessings to the household. Her husband, and I'm going to say assuming that he's of normal intelligence, will value, bless, and praise her. And this will make her secure. Moreover, her husband will also cherish and honor her, just like Ephesians and Peter tells him to do, unless he's just stupid. But this is some lady. Now, over in Israel, the culture, when this was written, was a bit different, because in the ancient culture, women oftentimes did pretty much everything in the household. There are still today Bedouin tribes, and it's still exactly like that. The woman does everything. She puts up the tent, she takes down the tent, she carries the tent when the encampment moves. By the way, she owns the tent too. She made the tent for their wedding, and it's her property. If the guy divorces her, she takes the tent and goes, okay? But they graze the sheep, they fix the meals, they plant the fields, they plow the fields, they gather the harvest. And in the meantime, the men are doing very important things. There's like what? Okay, like what?
Sitting on their butts.
Don't be so graphic. Be nice. I want to tell you how this really works. The tent's about 20 by 40, okay? Half the tent is where the woman stays with the kids. If it's raining, the sheep come in there. The food, the household goods, everything is in her half of the tent. 20 by 20, right? His half, 20 by 20, is a living room. It's usually got pillows. He can invite guests in. This is where he will entertain mainly. She's going to be busy fixing some food, you know. And the men will gather together to discuss the situations, the problems of the world, the things they need to do. If contain yourself, ladies, please. If they're going to move the encampment, let's say that the grass is running out, the sheep haven't got enough to eat, the men will decide when we're going to move, and the men will decide where we're going to move. That's important stuff, okay? If somebody's going to get married, who decides who the daughter's going to marry or who the son's going to marry? It's arranged by the parents, but who has the main say? Well, we've got to talk this over. This might be how we arrange the marriage. We've got all the men together. Everybody in the village is going to know what's planned and how it's going to go. There's actually, I love sharing this because I think it's so classic. There's a whole ceremony that goes on. You may have seen these little wooden mortar and pestle things. They crush coffee beans in them and stuff like that. Then they have a little spoon with wheels on it that goes over the fire pit, and you can roast your coffee. But each man in the village has a different beat. He's got his own sound, you know. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, Abdul's making coffee. When you make coffee, you make the noise because every man, is invited to coffee. Women are busy, they got stuff to do. But every man's invited to coffee, all right? The coffee is not good coffee, okay? It's bitter. And everybody gets a little cup of coffee and they all sip it loudly. And then they all turn to Abdul and say, man, you make the best coffee. This is incredible. And you're done with the first cup, then Abdul's gonna make tea, right? And he's going to give you tea, and it's sweetened with honey, wild honey. And you taste that, and the ceremony is we've experienced the bitterness of life and the sweetness of life together. Now we can discuss business. You'd never just jump in and go, this guy bugs me. His singing songs late at night. You got to start with the ceremony. Now, what if there's somebody at the meeting you want to talk about? You called the meeting. They heard your coffee sound. Everybody came over. But you need to discuss this situation about him without him being there. So when everybody finishes their first cup of bitterness, you give him another cup of coffee. And he can sit there and take it. And if he doesn't go, you give him a third cup of coffee. And by then he knows, okay, I'm not wanted here. And it's okay because he knows somebody else is going to call a meeting and we're going to figure this out because it's our community and it needs to be dealt with. So you can see that the men are doing really important things all day long.
Sure.
That's what Abraham was doing. You remember sitting in the door of the tent when those three angels showed up? And what did he say to his wife? Quick, make some lunch. We've got guests. You have to understand the custom, all right? But the Bedouins are, actually the Israeli government is trying to reestablish the Bedouins and move them into houses. It's so funny because they'll build a house, they'll give them a house, and you know what they'll do? Pitch their tent out back and live in the tent. The house becomes a storage place. And they don't want to change things. They're somewhat rebellious. They like their lifestyle the way it is. They found their virtuous woman, and they're taking care of everything else that needs to be taken care of. So there are some like this guy sitting in the gates, taking care of important things in life. And he goes on to say, let's get back to the text, many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. These words are words of her husband's praise. And he's found in her what his heart craves. He uses words that encourage and reward her. So, in a completely literal sense, you realize there could only be one woman in any given community at any time that would be the best mom, the best wife, right? But you have to understand that the sense of this is that every home can have the best mom. My mom's the best mom. Every home can have the best wife. I have the best wife of anybody. And every home can have this. And the husband can legitimately feel he's got the best wife. This is like the love of the heavenly bridegroom. He doesn't love one of us better than the other. He loves us all. We are his bride. He's the bridegroom. And he doesn't differentiate. This blows my mind again. I don't fit the list. And if you're honest, you probably don't either. But God loves me. And because of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, because of his blood that was shed, I've been covered. It's not like the Old Testament where they continued to do sacrifices to make a covering, an atonement. In the New Testament, that sacrifice was final. It paid for everything. I like to look at it as at one-ment, same spelling but different pronunciation. I am at one with Christ. I don't have to go back every week and sacrifice every few minutes and sacrifice another animal because I've been covered by the blood of Jesus Christ. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them. And then verses 30 through 31, we have the praise and reward of the wise woman. Now, the poet is reflecting on the picture he's drawn and the lessons he wants to impress on the readers. And here's the key to her greatness. Charm is deceitful. In other words, the graceful exterior is no index of a woman's nature. A woman can be charming. People can put up facades that'll last for a while, but it can be a false representation of the person. And he goes on with beauty too. Beauty's skin deep. People's flattery is a waste of time. Beauty is passing, he says, verse 30. And that word passing is literally in the Hebrew a breath. It can also be translated a popped soap bubble. We're going to read in the book of Ecclesiastes many times, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. Vanity is soap bubbles, popped soap bubbles. And I'll tell you again then, but I'll tell you now just for the fun of it. In my mean, evil-spirited heart, there was a bunch of kids at a birthday party, and I got out the bubbles, and I told them anybody could catch and bring me a bubble, I'd give them $1. And I blew bubbles, and boy, those kids were trying so hard to catch those bubbles. And you will never be able to catch a bubble and keep it. So that's the idea here. Beauty is vain. Popped soap bubble. Popularity doesn't last. Beauty passes. It doesn't endure. It's going to disappear. Physical beauty turns into wrinkles one way or another. By the way, I think that we begin losing our vision when we get older, so we can't see our spouse's wrinkles. It's like, hey, you still look good. But accept the true beauty of God's Spirit working in a person. The poet, he's not against physical beauty, but physical beauty is not the essential or most important characteristic. Character is the true criteria. Physical appearance is not necessarily dismissed, but it simply does not endure as the qualities of fearing the Lord. Charm is deceitful, beauty is passing, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. And that's the first thing that a man needs to look for in his relationship with a woman. The first thing that a woman needs to look for in a relationship with a man, that they would be someone that feared the Lord, that served the Lord. Charm and beauty are not bad, they're just simply inadequate reasons to marry somebody. She's cute, I like her personality. Does she serve the Lord? Is she godly? That's the difference. The reference to fear of the Lord in verse 30 takes us clear back to chapter 1, verse 7. You remember that? It starts out and it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. We also find it in the middle of the book, chapter 9, verse 10. And it says this virtuous woman is a woman that fears the Lord. The woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. So the first and last references frame this entire book. And the fact that she fears the Lord shows that she has a real relationship with him. The key or secret is her words, her ways, her dress. Everything's in order, as if he was present. And I think what the author is trying to say, our words, our ways, our attitudes, our actions and attitudes shouldn't just be, well, one day the Lord's coming, and I better be getting ready. Well, don't wait. Don't put it off. We should be living as if he is here right now. And in reality, he is. He's omnipresent. One time I had a teenage boy wanted to go to a rock and roll concert. And he asked me if I'd take him because his mother wouldn't. I talked it over with his mother, and she said, if you'll take him, okay. But I wanted to use it as a teaching moment. So we get to this arena, and this rock band is playing, and I go, would you invite Jesus instead of me to come with you to this? And he said, no. And I said, why? And he said, well, I don't think this is the kind of place Jesus would hang out. I said, do you think this is the kind of place you should hang out? And it gave him something to think about. By the way, he didn't talk to me very much after that. So hopefully the teaching point hit the target. I want to be ready. He's right here listening to everything you're saying. He knows our thoughts. He's watching everything you do. And your labor should be as unto the Lord, not somebody who's paying you. Your actions, your attitudes are as in his presence, because literally we are in his presence. Verse 31, give her the fruit of her hands and let her own works praise her in the gates. She will be rewarded by the God she fears. Give her credit, give her respect. So the passage is literally hollowing domestic life, a directory for wives and mothers, a beautiful ideal of how noble a thing a busy mother's wife can be, an exhortation to young men that they should seek a woman of what they should aim at, and each of us as the bride of Christ should grow towards, and the public recognition is coming for each one of us. You may not think so, but there's a thing coming in the near future called the Bema Seat Judgment. And there the Lord will proclaim out loud the things we did, the things that we accomplished on earth. And for the woman, the man of wisdom, this reward is not our primary motive, but it's the result of a life lived in the fear of the Lord. The Apostle Paul said, don't just run the race to get in by the skin of your teeth. I want to make a glorious entrance, doing everything I could for the Lord Jesus Christ before his coming. Don't you want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant? What I don't want to hear is, I see you made it. We should be that same way. I would hope that you would go back over this description of this woman, put yourself in her place with Jesus Christ as the husband, see how close you come, and then spend time in prayer. And hopefully our study of Proverbs has given you a clearer vision of that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And may we be dedicated to God as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to the Lord. Romans 12:1. Difficult standards in our flesh, but I'm reminded in the book of Philippians, all things are possible through Christ Jesus who strengthens me. So, praise the Lord. We finished the book of Proverbs. Next week, we'll begin the book of Ecclesiastes. Please read ahead. Would you all stand with me and let's pray.